Like, I only realised since this lockdown, like, how much I need kind of the praise of other people. Like,
need that validation.
Exactly.
Hi, and welcome to Beer Christianity. My name is Jonty.
I'm Laura.
And we are joined by...
Holly and Petersen.
Holly
and
Petersen.
Jump me in the middle.
Sorry,
like
we could really have done with actually warning you
we
about
could
that.
have warned you.
Sorry about that. Holly and Petersen joining us for a discussion about things to do with the environment and to do with Extinction Rebellion and to do with activism and justice generally. So Holly, Anna, thank you so much for joining us and for being willing to talk to us. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Do you prefer Holly or Holly Anna?
Just go with Holly. Holly Anna's a mouthful. Just go with Holly, yeah.
Fantastic. I guess the first question and probably the most important of the evening will be, what are you drinking right now?
So I am drinking a solid kind of standard wine. I'm not a wine connoisseur, so I don't think I even know what type of wine it is, but I'm just a standard white wine.
You're our kind of woman. We generally do not know anything about the alcohol we consume right now. Laura, what you drinking?
I'm on the classic Jack Daniels and Coke, as is tradition and the
In accordance with prophecy. And I have got a colourful and also nicely textured thing. This is how I buy my beer now, basically, is I look for check out the pretty cans.
Oh,
like,
hello.
This is just lovely. It's so colourful.
Lovely.
Right?
How can you not pick that up?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's got a magpie. Ooh, it's got nice colours.
Legitimately, that's what I'm basing it on. It's called Metroland, and it's a session IPA from Two Tribes, whatever the hell that is, who have a symbol that looks a little bit like the Aphex Twin logo. And it does have things like ABV 3.8%, but then also 9.5 degrees Plato. That seems like a thing. Know what that is.
Just in case you wanted to know, you know.
Yeah, you know, how many degrees Plato is this drink? Holly, the reason we have you on here is because you're in a book that we recommended on a previous podcast, and you are somebody who I've encountered for many years in the kind of Christian justice scene, and also you are part of the Christian, I want to say, wing militia of Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion's Christian militia. I feel like that seems reasonable.
No, good use of language there. I like it.
I'll be on the website tomorrow.
I guess I didn't really fully know that Extinction Rebellion had a kind of Christian group within it, or that was kind of organized in that way. First of all, how did you get involved with Extinction Rebellion?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually in the fact that, so yes, I'm kind of I'm a member of Christian Climate Action, which, as you say, is the kind of Christian militia of Extinction Rebellion, obviously, and it's a bit of a weird one in the fact that Christian Climate Action actually predates Extinction Rebellion. So, I mean, none of us, and it's quite ridiculous, none of us actually can pinpoint when Christian Climate Action first started, maybe around about 6 years ago. And so what happened is we've been doing kind of non-violent direct action for about kind of 5 years before Extinction Rebellion came into fruition. And actually we were one of the groups that they approached to get involved at the beginning. And then because we were kind of such a cool group of Extinction Rebellion at the beginning, it's basically kind of, we've become known as the Christians of Extinction Rebellion, which is why we're, I guess, not called, kind of, XR Christians. We've retained our name. So yeah, that's really how we started getting involved.
I find that incredibly exciting and encouraging, that because I think we have this perception that Christians are kind of behind the curve on a lot of social justice issues. I don't think we actually are. I think we've been involved in kind of Jubilee debt and all that kind of stuff, and kind of helping to set the tone. But to think that Extinction Rebellion were actually, coming to you guys, that's spectacular.
it is funny, isn't it? Kind of, it's when you picture a Christian, you almost kind of picture them as being very late to the party. But you know, there's lots of stuff that obviously that we stand for. It's you know, our faith is kind of very much intertwined with justice, so it makes sense that we'd also be kind of pioneering on lots of these types of parts.
Fantastic. Also, Laura, if you want to jump in at any point with questions and stuff, you are, you know, obviously. It's not like I have to say that. Hey, man, I'm trying to. Okay, actually, I revoke that permission. You just sit there. Shutting down your mic right now. How did so they came to you because you guys are known for your nonviolent direct action. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of stuff you guys have been doing and what you have been known for?
Yeah, so I guess one thing that's important to say is, you know, we started doing nonviolent direct action obviously kind of a long time ago, but at that time there were very few of us. You know, we were doing nonviolent direct action, but not really anyone was massively taking notice. And I mean, we weren't doing it because, you know, we were doing it because, you know, it's important as a Christian to not be doing these things because we want to be successful, but because we want to be faithful. So we were kind of chugging along, doing our thing in the background, and there were lots of different things that we were taking a stand against. So we were doing some actions on kind of fossil fuel divestment. So the church has kind of hundreds of millions of pounds in the fossil fuel industry. We were doing actions outside government. We were doing things like activism, which is everyone when you say the word activism is like, oh, that interestingly perks up. Activism is basically when you do kind of I guess interactive protest plays where you go to somewhere which is maybe kind of doing an activity which you disagree with or which you feel is kind of oppressive in some way, and doing, I guess, kind of a disruptive interactive play. So we were doing things like that.
Were you like involved with Christian Climate Action from the start? Like, when did you personally actually start getting involved with them?
Yeah, so I was involved from the start, and it was kind of a group of us who, with the majority of us, our background was in the NGO sector. So we had been, I guess, kind of campaigning more broadly on justice issues for a long period of time, and I guess increasingly getting quite, I guess, frustrated and exhausted about the fact that we were putting kind of lots of time and energy into these things that we passionately cared about, but that actually, you know, we just weren't seeing the change that was needed. And so we just started collectively kind of thinking about, you know, just getting frustrated. This actually this doesn't seem to be working. And so what alternatives can we see to be trying to make a difference in this situation? So we started having meetings and then getting trained up and things like that. And yeah, kind of came from there.
What kind of stuff were you doing with your activism, or even with your kind of interactive stuff, and that kind of disruptive demonstration stuff? Because I always think that's a really beautiful aspect of the kind of progressive or left-wing protest movement.
So I guess we would do activism at places like Church House, and we would do it to basically kind of spread the message to the church, but we would also do it kind of alongside organisations. So there is a group called BP or Not BP, which they are absolutely amazing at doing this stuff. And so we did some things alongside them. So, and that would be really about kind of fossil fuel sponsorship of the arts. So like the British Museum, for example, fossil fuel sponsorship of British Museum, and kind of fossil fuel sponsorship of the Globe. Doing things like that. It's so scary doing that. Like for a few kind of months have been on the sidelines watching other people doing it, and I was like, you know, that looks so courageous, that looks so cool, I really want to get involved. And the first one that I got involved in, I think there was like 4 of us, and I was kind of physically shaking before I did it. And it was, I remember just kind of, I think I only had about 4 lines or something, but I think I managed to screw up every single one of those lines just because it's such a scary thing to do. You know, it's a scary thing to kind of perform publicly, but it's also even more scary to publicly perform in somewhere where you're not meant to be publicly performing.
That is solid.
Sure.
You also said something I found really cool of you're doing this not because you necessarily think I can't remember the words you use, you not because you necessarily think you're going to win, but because you want to be faithful.
Exactly.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess with many things, I think the motivation that we have is we do almost this calculation, which is, you know, effort in versus reward out, or kind of effort in versus success. And if actually the effort in doesn't really match up to kind of what we think we're going to get out of it, or kind of how successful we're going to be, then usually kind of, you know, we don't actually end up even kind of trying. And that can be really detrimental to social justice movements, because in, you know, the vast number of kind of cases, actually it's against the odds. You know, we are kind of standing up against organizations who have, you know, so much money, so much power, that actually the odds of it being successful is, you know, when you kind of think of it in that kind of context, it seems so remotely small. But I think that's one of the most powerful things about the Christian faith, that we are called to be faithful, not successful. So, you know, it's just about, are you being faithful? Are you seeing an injustice happening, and are you doing what is within your power to stand up against that? And if the answer is yes, then there's nothing more that can be expected of you. It doesn't matter if, you know, you succeed. Obviously, we always do hope to succeed and actually kind of create changes in the world. But I actually think, you know, when you do get kind of campaign successes or protest successes, it is always kind of very surprising, because of the fact that it's kind of so, yeah, I know, I don't think anyone necessarily kind of goes in and thinking that they will 100% fail, but it's acknowledging that actually there might be a kind of very remote chance that is the case.
I remember Stephen Rand saying to me in an interview that when they were doing anti-apartheid activism, they in no way thought that they were going to bring about the end of apartheid, but they just felt like it was really important to fight it anyway. And they were frankly shocked when apartheid fell.
Exactly. And it also, you know, that has a really big impact on your motivation to continue. If you are only participating because you want that, you know, you want that success, you want that kind of feedback, you want that result, then it's not going to be sustainable. You know, you're going to burn out so quickly. And so that's another thing that kind of Christianity can bring, in that kind of like, actually the reward is knowing that you did the right thing in this situation kind of consistently.
And you also seem to be doing some stuff that's very effective in terms of getting the results, though, if what you're aiming to do is to raise awareness and to change people's minds and all that kind of stuff. Because these kind of public demonstrations that you were talking about, and more artistic ones, I saw you carrying a coffin at Greenbelt. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that was about?
I guess there's kind of different facets of what we do. So alongside kind of the nonviolent direct action work that we do, we also try to engage people emotionally in what is happening around the world, and provide spaces where that can happen in kind of a safe environment. Because one of, I guess, the difficulties with the climate crisis that we face is it is so huge that it's so kind of easy for people to jump from, you know, one day we're in a camp of denial, and then maybe, you know, we open up to kind of what the crisis is, and we go into kind of we go on the flip side and we go into despair. So actually kind of that trying to sit in that center ground, where it's actually kind of, you know, coming to terms with this huge thing that we've got in front of us, and actually, you know, what is the thing that I can do which is within my control. It takes a lot of emotional processing. So I guess that thing that you saw with the carrying of that coffin, it was a symbolic action where it was kind of allowing people space to grieve what they are kind of mourning for the world, it be that kind of now or the future. And providing that space where people can feel like they're part of something, and kind of being alongside other people in that and giving it kind of the space that it almost deserves.
You're not setting yourselves up to fail, but you're not expecting to succeed. It must take a massive toll on your mental health. Like, I cannot, like that must be so hard to deal with. Like, how is it, how do you get through that? How do you keep on going to like keeping on doing these things over again?
It's a really good question, because and there's different kind of aspects to that. I first became, I guess, kind of aware of the climate crisis in a meaningful way when I was about, 20 years old, and I was doing my biology degree. And we had to learn about this stuff and then go away and learn more about it. And I found it just really overwhelming. Like, and now when I kind of meet people who are having that experience for the first time, I can completely, I'm just like, that is a horrible place to be in, being kind of like physically kind of panicky in the middle of the night, kind of waking up and just being like, I need to do something. It's like, no, you need to be asleep right now. So it is kind of just kind of coming to terms with the reality of the climate crisis is a really difficult thing to process. And so I actually find it cathartic that I have managed to find a way to channel that energy into something productive. Kind of, I find that process quite helpful. But there is a kind of massive element of what we do, which is, regen. And we do things called kind of grief circles, where we, again, kind of try to create safe spaces for people to be able to process that. But also just kind of being in actions. It is exactly the type of situation which would make you feel anxiety. There's uncertainty, there's, public opinion. We don't know what the police are going to do. We don't know kind of, people are making kind of big sacrifices. People have, made the decision that they want to kind of be arrested for these things. And so there's a lot of kind of uncertainty, unpredictability, and kind of, it's a very intense situation. So that as well is very difficult to kind of emotionally process and comprehend and prepare yourself for. And so there is a lot of, luckily I work in mental health, so I feel quite kind of prepared for that, and like I can support people in that journey. And I think actually Extinction Rebellion in general do that, very well with the resources that they have for regen and grief circles. So I think we try as best we can. Nothing's going to be perfect, but I've been involved in kind of a number of different non-violent threat action groups, and actually I have consistently been kind of surprised in a positive way at how well Extinction Rebellion, I think, have dealt with that aspect of it.
There has been some criticism of Extinction Rebellion about either being too extreme or being, or indeed coming back to that thing of not necessarily engaging enough with the powers that be, and not being focused enough on what are you going to achieve right now. How do you feel about those kinds of criticisms?
So with the extreme aspect of it, like I completely understand how that could be said, looking at it from maybe kind of another perspective that's different to my own. I can imagine that if I was thinking about the climate crisis and then I saw these people on the TV who were, getting arrested or kind of doing these quite kind of intense things, I can imagine that would be something that I can imagine how that point of view comes about, basically. For me, I think, we have such a small window of time that we can actually, turn around this crisis. We've been told kind of that we need change in an unprecedented speed and scale. So unprecedented, quicker than anything else that have happened, if we stand a chance at combating the climate crisis. And so it needs to be action which is proportionate to that change that we need. And I found it actually very distressing constantly being told that I should reduce, reuse, recycle, which, yes, those are very kind of good things to do. But actually, when you are in a crisis situation, being told to do those kind of small gestures, I found that really difficult to comprehend, because I knew it was not going to tackle actually the crisis that we were facing. So I actually found it relieved a lot of my anxiety, because I was like, maybe this is something which, it might not tackle the situation, but I felt like it was something that might do. Do you know what I mean? Doing nonviolent direct action or kind of mass mobilization, mass uprisings, I felt like that is something that might potentially have a chance of actually kind of creating a real change that we needed. If you're hearing kind of things on the news, if you're looking at it on the TV, it can look quite unstructured, and it can seem quite confusing and quite scary. But it is actually structured. You know, nonviolent direct action isn't just, you know, you pick up a placard, you go on the street, you yell, and you kind of shake that placard. That isn't nonviolent direct action. Nonviolent direct action, you know, there's been lots of research on it. There's principles of nonviolent direct action. So there's kind of economic disruption, sacrifice, nonviolence, things like that. And there's strategies which have been shown to bring about change. And if we kind of look at social justice movements of the past, it has been principles like that which has created the change needed at the speed and scale that we need. And so I completely understand that sometimes it can look scary, but it is, for me, it's not scary because I feel like it's given me a bit of hope. But I do understand that people can find it maybe kind of a bit extreme, maybe kind of looking at it first.
But not as extreme and scary as entire ecosystem collapse, obviously, which I think they'd probably find scarier.
Exactly. And actually one of the most difficult conversations that I had, and I still reflect back on it sometimes, was at Greenbelt. And a mother came up to me and she said that hearing about the climate crisis is too difficult for children, and actually we shouldn't be doing what we're doing because it is causing distress in children. And I found that really difficult to kind of know what the right kind of way forward is, because obviously I hope, or like my wish more than anything, is that we did not have to do this. You know, I would much rather be at home having a cup of tea than be like spending 2 weeks of my annual leave in the rain. Like, that is doing these kind of scary things. I mean, it's also, you know, it's very rewarding. You form great relationships. It's kind of a lot of fun and everything like that. But the planning takes a lot of kind of, it wears basically. So yeah, I would much rather not have to do that. But it is, you know, it's a hard thing telling the truth. It's kind of that fine line between denial and kind of despair. Actually kind of telling the truth is part of that process of actually kind of getting people engaged. And, you know, we wish the truth wasn't the truth, but actually that's a really important first step for actually tackling the difficulty that we're facing.
And I think the distress caused to a middle-class child in a G8 nation has to be kind of held in balance with the distress caused to children in, you know, Bangladesh, because we're all going to be affected, but the poorest of the poor get affected first and worst, right?
Definitely. And that's the thing. So it's, you know, there are people around the world who are losing their lives pushing to stand up for the environment they need to sustain themselves. And so if we don't step up and do it ourselves, we are putting more of that burden on them. We are putting more burden on the poorest communities around the world and on the youth who are having to skip school for their futures to be taken seriously. It's such a ridiculous situation that we're in. Yeah. And so, you know, it shouldn't be the case that they have to do that. We should be stepping up and doing it so that they don't have to. Mm. And so, yeah, we in Christian Climate Action, we work alongside a group called Fulbari Solidarity. We try to, as much as possible, kind of be respectful, and they very much kind of want us to be doing this type of thing. So I guess it's about, you know, kind of trying to respect different groups that are involved, really.
I think that was one of the most encouraging things I found from reading This Is Not a Drill, the Extinction Rebellion book, was how much they were sort of like, we are learning from all of the Indigenous people who have been fighting this fight for so many more years than we have. Like, yeah, I found that really good, that it was like fully recognizing that we are the privileged ones who are able, I mean, maybe more so than others, to kind of be on the streets, but who also definitely putting the time in to learn from like Native American groups and things like that, of like who have already been fighting this fight for so long.
Exactly. And I definitely want to kind of put my hands up and say, you know, we are not doing this perfectly. If I was to ask who's perfect with this role, it definitely wouldn't be me. Like, I am not doing this because I think I'm perfect for it. I'm doing it because, you know, if not me, then who? I guess kind of like I may as well. Someone's got to do it. So we're definitely kind of not. Well, we're kind of definitely not saying that kind of we're doing everything perfectly and things like that. But I guess this is what we're kind of trying to do as much as possible.
What would you say to, I think there'll be Christians listening to this who perhaps come from a different perspective politically or theologically. So maybe some of their concerns or just questions that we could answer. So to somebody who says, hey, we're meant to submit to authorities, render to Caesar, yada, 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 civil disobedience, Christians shouldn't do it. What would your response be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to a Catholic school when I was younger, and I was kind of given the perspective of Jesus and Mary, that they were these kind of quiet people who, were very well behaved and never kind of very much kind of pushover, kind of doormat kind of people. And I didn't connect with that narrative, and I found it very kind of confusing and quite oppressive in a way. And I became a Christian actually later when I was 18 years old. And I guess for me, when I see kind of the story of Jesus's life as a whole, it kind of that standing up for justice just kind of weaves through it, but in such a beautiful way. So the way that it's done in a way where, that vulnerability and that sacrifice is there from the very beginning to the very end, I just find so powerful. And it's that grittiness to Christ, which I find really compelling and beautiful. So the fact that, God, the kind of all-powerful, decides to become this vulnerable flesh and kind of live amongst us and kind of stand up. I see his life as kind of standing up to the oppressive powers. And, I've theologians like Walter Wink and people like that, and kind of talk about that very eloquently. But then I guess kind of it comes to kind of a week before kind of his execution, when he, in the temple, turns over the tables and speaks the truth to the crowds. And, that is what led to his death. And the fact that he was so scared before that happens, I find so incredible. We almost kind of talk about Jesus like he's this person who never got scared. He knew what was what from the very beginning. He never had any emotions. He just kind of, it was all so easy for him. But,
the Sheldon Cooper of ancient Israel, let's see.
Yeah, exactly. But I find it so much more powerful. Like I think it's Luke's gospel where he talks about like his sweat turning to blood, and that is actually kind of documented in cases where people are being condemned to execution. And just the thought that he was absolutely petrified, that he knew he was walking towards, an excruciating and humiliating death, but he walked forwards anyway. I just find that just the most beautiful thing, and that's exactly how I want to live my life by. I mean, I am not saying that in any way, shape or form I meet that level, but it's such a compelling and beautiful thing to be trying to emulate. And I just, we talk about this kind of this love which casts out fear. Do you know why, what kind of more is, what's the most kind of beautiful thing to use that in than standing up for justice? Because that is the time where I personally most need it.
I also love, I read something online recently, which I had never picked up on this, but in some of the verses about Jesus kind of, also side note, not non-violent. I mean, non-lethal, but definitely not non-violent. He's literally whipping people, which I quite like. And, but the most like badass part of that, I thought, was the fact that he doesn't just pick up a whip. He braids a whip. So he was sitting there thinking, I'm going to hit some, I'm gonna let loose, like, it's premeditated, just this cold, like, oh, it's coming,
Yeah, exactly. He had so much time to decide what he wanted to do. It wasn't impulsive.
Yeah, it's not like he's losing his temper there. He's like, I'm angry enough to now really plan this. I think it's just superb. So yeah, I guess like that sense of sometimes it is because you hear this a lot with any kind of protests, if it's the Israel-Palestine stuff, if it's anything to do with economic justice as well. At any point somebody breaks a window, it's like, well, obviously that entire protest is now illegitimate. And do you think Christians have maybe become slightly conformed to the thinking of this world, that we value, property in a localized setting like that, or order in a localized, specific time and place, over the larger goal that we're trying to fight for here, and the larger things at stake?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it is interesting. So different people have different perspectives on what the term nonviolent means. And that's actually something that we explore in our training, that actually, that can create some kind of tension in a group if people have different ideas. And so what does nonviolence actually mean?
So otherwise you guys are going to end up punching each other, which is not
exactly. That is not what we want. Yeah, it is an interesting one, isn't it? It's obviously there is merit to being nice, and there is merit to being polite, but it's about, I think, being assertive. So I think that there's 3 different types of communication styles. There's passive, assertive, and aggressive. And it's quite often that, we kind of see this as some binary way, that either, we're passive or we're passive or we're aggressive. But that actually, it's not good to be aggressive. It's not good to be passive. You shouldn't be a doormat and kind of not say what you believe, not say kind of what you need and things like that. Assertive is always kind of the best way to be. And I think it's kind of, Christianity has got this kind of weird binary thing, that it's like either you're passive or you're aggressive, and we don't kind of understand what that middle ground actually looks like.
Wait a minute, before we carry on, I really need another beer, so I'm just going to quickly open this one. I mean, I may be drinking faster than you. I am drinking faster than you guys. That is...
it's okay, I'm on number 2.
Hey! Holly is being a decent human being and drinking quite slowly, but it's the first time on the podcast. So.
She is also on the wine, so we all know that's, you never want to drink wine that fast.
I end up drinking my wine at the same speed that I drink my beer, which is probably why one day my liver's going to strangle me.
I got tagged in one of those Instagram challenges where you're supposed to down a pint. I didn't have a pint, I only had wine. And I downed quite a big glass of wine.
You tagged me in this.
I did tag you in that, and you haven't done it.
I couldn't hear because I was watching TV with my wife, so I was watching it going like, Laura's proud of her drinking tonight, all right? You're such a lad.
Downed a glass of wine, and but I realised shortly after having down the glass of wine that I hadn't actually eaten anything since midday, and then subsequently had 2 more glasses of wine, and it was a bad decision.
I mean, if you ever want to know, Holly, what Laura's like when she's properly hammered, you should just listen to our C.S. Lewis episode of this, because she was
similarly
special.
With wine, cider. Not one to drink fast.
I love the concept of this podcast. I love it. I love the fact as well. It's probably like, you start off having kind of, quite kind of deep and meaningful conversation, and by the end it just descends into anarchy.
Oh, we end up talking so slowly at the end of the episode. I listen to myself and I'm like, I am trying to make this point. It's like, yeah, it's not good.
If you'll just listen.
I love you guys. I love you so much. You're my best friends. Very similar to that. Also, by the way, because sometimes people ask us what we're drinking. I'm drinking Beavertown Neck Oil, which is a great name for a beer, and it also has, guys, check us out. What a pretty can!
That's another excellent can.
It's beautiful.
So you're gonna have to take photos of these cans and put them on Instagram.
I should. They're very pretty.
Pretty.
Okay, other stuff that Christians may have an issue with would be But
those Christians, eh?
Christians.
Oh, good Lord.
I just love the way you spoke about them in the third person.
Sorry. I was going to say those Christians. Some Christians might have an issue with the idea of caring about creation, the environment at all, because ultimately we were put here to be to have dominion over the earth and to subdue it, and that means that we don't have to care about it at all. And ultimately, hey, it's all going to get burned up at the end of days, so who cares? And I think so. You could have right-wingers who have an issue with it that way, and actually, I think you could have some fairly progressive people who'd probably be closer to our own opinion, who would say, I love your concern for the trees, but I care about the people, and what I need is for India and China to catch up with the Industrial Revolution, and that means burning coal. And the idea of people in the developing world stopping developing or slowing the development that could raise people out of poverty because the West has now had its fill of polluting the earth might also be, like from a Christian perspective, in terms of justice and in terms of eschatology, what's your view?
Wow, there's a few questions in
Sorry,
that
that's so many questions. That's a terrible way to answer. So look, if you could answer all of those, that'd be great.
And remember everything that Jonty said.
Chapter 1. Yeah,
yes.
sorry.
So I guess, it's interesting. I think when I first became a Christian, it was very much was very focused on my relationship with God, my relationship with Jesus. And, that was a beautiful time of my life. I fell in love with God, and that is still a really kind of prominent part of my faith. Talking about kind of being drunk, I remember when I kind of was first a Christian, I went through the stage. This is really embarrassing to admit. I went through a stage. It's not embarrassing. I am proud. I went through a stage where whenever I got drunk, I used to cry and be like, I love Jesus.
That is beautiful.
Oh, that's lovely.
Maybe, you never know. It might make a repeat performance.
I think that's lovely. You carry on drinking, Holly. Let's see what happens.
But anyway, so yeah, that was kind of a beautiful place where my faith started, and so it was very much kind of a part of that. And I guess kind of it's weird that when I started my biology degree and learning about kind of the natural world, I started getting passionate about the environment, because I understood how everything is kind of interconnected and why it's so important that we understand that for kind of the well-being of everything, of ecosystems, of species, of humans as well. The reason that I'm kind of passionate about the environment is because it reflects so much of, well, firstly, because it reflects so much of God's character. We can see the power, the kind of the character of God through what God has made. And that really became apparent to me, where before I went on my biology degree, I used to get so irritated by the Trinity, like 3 in 1. Can it make up its mind? Is it 3 or is it bloody 1? I used to get so annoyed by this.
Pick a person, all right? Wow.
Exactly. And I was like, it's just speaking in riddles. I don't know what you mean. And then I kind of did my biology degree, and I was like, the whole world is like this. Like, I am fully human, but I have more bacteria cells in my body than human cells. And like, not just me, everyone. Just.
I was going to say, Holly, was that part of all the drinking? Because that happens. I can't actually carry on making that joke. So sorry.
Where was I?
Okay, wait. So you got more. So, and also like mitochondria, right? Because they don't even they don't even have human origin. Is that right?
Hello, exactly.
I mean,
so
and we literally cannot process. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Every single cell of our body, there is an ancient bacteria which is like fused with our cells. Every single time a cell divides, that little mitochondria divides as well. Exactly. So we are literally like it makes complete sense, and that's just kind of like us, but it is everywhere in the environment. So of course, a creator is going to, like, in a creation that reflects its character, of course it's going to create it in that way. And then I completely understood the whole 3-in-1 thing. And so I think that's just one example, but there's so many other examples where creation tells us so much about the creator. And, everything that, if we create something and we think that it is good, we have such a, sense of, love for the creation. And God said that every single day of that creation story. And at the end, he reflected on how kind of beautiful it was. And so it just seems to me just so much of a travesty that we are undoing that creation. It's just so kind of painful for me to see, and how beautifully it's all kind of knitted together so carefully and lovingly. And to see that being undone is just so difficult. But yes, for the other part of your question, which is about, even if we do take the perspective that, all these species that God took the time to, to make very carefully, even if we believe that actually it's only humans that he cares about, there is a reason why God didn't make us in isolation. There's a reason why he made a creation, because creation sustains us. And so even if we only care about man, even if we only care about Christians, there are people around the world now who are so distressed and so scared because of the fact that, their environment is just not sustaining them anymore. Even if we only look at that, this needs to be kind of taken seriously. We need to look at it in a more kind of holistic context.
No.
I feel like a lot of the Christian rhetoric, like the Christian climate rhetoric that I hear, at least I may be wrong, is like it's a lot of it is focused about how we as Christians identify as, like, how we should identify with this fight against, like, climate change. I don't massively hear a lot about how that should fit into our church life. Like, you don't hear a lot of, like, I mean, that's not something I necessarily hear a lot of, like, sermons based on climate action and stuff like that. Is there a place for that in the church? Do you think there should be our Christian climate action doing anything in that, like, space?
So the church that I'm part of an Anglican church called St Luke's in Holloway. In ordinary time of the church calendar, we only had sermons on climate change in that time, which is kind of unprecedented for us. We never really kind of previously to that. It's not like we do that every week. But so I think there is a change happening, that actually the church is becoming more aware that actually this is something which, should be on our agenda. And, we have had lots of requests. Christian Climate Action has had a lot more requests kind of in the last year to be going and giving sermons and things like this. Churches are often privileged to have, big buildings. So it can be, they can really help out with kind of spaces to be able to kind of give trainings and just kind of provide that kind of practical support as well. But kind of in a kind of slightly different context, what I've been quite kind of overwhelmed with really is as well as doing different things for Christian Climate Action, I do the social media stuff. So it's quite a privilege really to have that kind of direct interaction with people when they write to Christian Climate Action. I'm the first one who reads it. What I found emotional to read is the amount of people who have messaged and said, like, I used to be a Christian, but I'm not a Christian anymore, or I've never been a Christian, and actually it's been something which has been quite a thing that's angered me maybe in the past, and saying like, but I saw actually the action that you did the other day and it really moved me, or just kind of it kind of really connected with what I thought church should be, things like that. There's been quite a lot of those messages which I found quite overwhelming. So I guess that's kind of looking at that in a slightly different context of what church could be. Sometimes we think about church as it being kind of in the buildings, whereas actually there's kind of different expressions about what church can be as well.
Is there a danger that you get the church involved, you get the church fired up, all the demonstrations actually are just winsome enough and just disturbing enough to get them involved, and what they do is go, like reuse, recycle, like that's, I'm going to change those light bulbs and then we're going to knock this thing on its ass, like is that, like, how much in order to fight the kind of climate catastrophe that is coming, do we need to change our economic system? Do we need to change the fundamentals that don't require or or some have called it blame individual actions for what is a systemic problem?
I mean, first of all, I want to say I feel like I gave quite a bad rap to reduce, reuse, recycle. I mean, there is still merit to that. I more see it as like part of my worship, as in like it's something we should do in our individual lifestyles to honor God. But basically it's kind of, we've been pushing that message for a long time, and it has not created the change that's needed. So I don't see it as being kind of on its own being able to kind of tackle things at the speed and scale we need. So I am not anti reducing, reusing and recycling, but yes, there is always kind of I guess it can be frustrating, I guess, when maybe kind of you're invited to give a talk and you feel like you're talking with the urgency of the situation, and when that is the takeaway message, that can be quite disheartening. I can't remember the second part of the question.
I'm basically asking, can capitalism solve this crisis?
Good question. Okay. Previously, I would have said no. However, I am now kind of moving away from that, and I think that there is merit in lots of different ways. So I just basically want to get zero carbon as quickly as possible. If that happens because Extinction Rebellion is beyond party politics. So, it's not saying, we want those on the left wing to get involved and that's the way that we're going to solve this. Actually, there is merit across the political spectrum. And I guess that is something that I am growing to understand. Whatever way, so kind of I'm not an idealist, whatever way we can get there, we get there. Under any government, under any kind of political system, the end goal is that we get there. And that I think that's kind of a really powerful thing about one of the Extinction Rebellion goals, which is people's assembly. That actually we are not here to say how we can get to that end goal of zero greenhouse gases by 2025. It's up to the people, because this is going to affect lots of individual people's lives. It's up to the people as to each have their input into kind of how that comes about.
This is why I love China. Just putting it out there, they get the job done. Excellent.
I guess I was interested in the current kind of situation, the elephant in the room, shall we say, of coronavirus. I guess kind of countries on lockdown, out in the street protests are not possible right now. What is Christian Climate Action currently doing? Is it like, has it stopped? Are things still happening? Like, what's the deal?
That is a really, really good question. So we've been on lockdown now for, around about a month. It feels like about 7 months. But
10 of the longest years of your life. Yeah.
It's constantly Tuesday.
Yeah. I guess so. There was a May rebellion scheduled, which has obviously kind of now been postponed. Actually, we are taking this time. It's been kind of a bit of a slow transition for us. So I guess there's a lot of things to process individually and kind of collectively as well. So first of all, we just kind of left some time for, people to just do their own thing. How is this affecting your life? How can we support you in doing that? So we set up kind of prayer spaces where people could process that, have check-ins and things like that. And we are starting now to kind of get into the stage where we're thinking about what could it look like going forward. The coronavirus, obviously, it's kind of, having really big impacts on kind of the majority of people, and so it's important to kind of hold that respectively for people to be able to have that time to process what that means to them. I guess it's also kind of quite we've got a unique situation. This is such an unprecedented situation which is happening at the moment, and with the with the promised economic stimulus that's happening, there's lots of potential that actually that could be used to go right back to business as usual, kind of full pelt, or that could be used to really promote an economy and a society which puts people and planet first. So there is kind of a unique situation which is kind of on the horizon. but how it works, a non-violent direct action group, which is very kind of tangible, like the way that we work is having a presence kind of on the streets and stuff like that. How that converts to being in isolation, we're still kind of trying to work that out at the moment.
I'm assuming you guys are going to start Zoom bombing people's family gatherings and telling them about the climate. No. I'm assuming that's just pictures of polar bears on their screens. And like, not polar bears, that is an unfair characterization.
I'll take a note of that. I'll bring it to our next planning meeting.
I'm just saying there are no wrong answers,
Yeah.
If people want to get involved, if people want to find out more, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah, so first of all, if people want to get involved, there is lots of different roles, first of all. So the majority of the stuff that gets in the headlines is, obviously kind of the arrests and things like that. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath that, there are so many different support roles which are needed. So any way that you feel you want to get involved, please do. I am personally non-arrestable myself, and I am still a very much kind of needed and central kind of part of what we do. And so any gift that you have, very much kind of welcome, and please do bring it. So you can go to the Christian Climate Action website, which is just kind of christianclimateaction.org. We've got a Twitter, and Twitter handle is cclimateaction. You can find us on Facebook and things like that. And yeah, Fantastic. We'd love to hear from you.
Excellent work.
Great.
Well, Holly, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for listening to Beer Christianity. You can find Beer Christianity at beerchristianity.libsyn.com. You can find us on Twitter with BeerXianity. You can email our retro Yahoo address, beerchristianity@yahoo.com, because, we're old school.
We haven't had a Yahoo joke in a few episodes.
It's been a while, and I feel I've got to bring that course. So, you can find us there. You can find us on YouTube, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And if you wanted to review us and rate us and share us, that would be great. Holly, a final thought or message to the Beer Christianity listeners?
Oh, wow. Is this something you do every week? Should I have known that this was coming?
No.
Oh, fantastic.
Just for you.
Holly, I literally freestyle everything that I do in my entire life. Nothing is planned.
It's true.
I guess. Oh my gosh. You can tell I've had kind of several glasses of wine. I'm starting to get kind of deep and meaningful.
I'll start weeping any minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I guess kind of the takeaway would just be kind of spending a bit of time to process, what you can do, which is maybe kind of within your control, but outside of your comfort zone.
That is good advice. Thank you very much. Right, shots.
Shots.
Holly, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.